So yesterday we were talking, the previous episode we talked about Zool being the agent for taking the client ID and client secret, passing it to our to token server. No, there is something as authorization also, right? So authorization server will pass you authorizing code and then you also take that code and get to our token server. So that is during grant type is authorization code. But here we are dealing the grant type as client credentials. What exactly I mean by that is, so what I mean by is grant type is client credentials. So that is very important. So when your it's client credentials, so you're going to pass the client ID and client secret to what to token server. But a very important point here to remember is that here also we have to know the sequence based on which the authorization and getting tokens happens. So let's try to see that now. Now we're going to discuss here about the sequence of how exactly the authorization is happening in the client credentials as grant type. We need to notice here that when you send your client credentials, that is client secret and the client ID uh, in the header, this is first received by our Zool gateway, and the Zool gateway will request tokens to authorization server. Authorization server will issue tokens, and one important thing is that it issues a private key. This is where we need to pay more attention. And then also it provides a JWKS endpoint. So when it provides these things to you, your Zool, again, we are not going to validate the JWT here in our application, but we'll do the validation in Zool gateway itself. And after it validates the Zool gateway, it sends back these request to authorization server where the JWKS endpoint is provided, and then it comes some authorization server, recognize yes, it's from the right backend service. The request is coming and it approves that. So this is a basic explanation of the sequence. Why do we need a JWT? That is the question. Now here, the JWT is needed only to confirm that the request is coming from the right source. Sometimes request maybe the the uh, G, the details of a JWKS maybe coming from some other server. So how do you know that it's exactly the one I gave the private key? So this is the way it serves that. It has a private key, and when it it's validating uh, the authorization server. It knows, yeah, since I gave the private key and exposed the public key, I know this is the right source. So it's not only doing the job of providing you here the tokens, it also is making sure that the request is coming from the correct source. So that's the role of JWT. But we'll go try to go more deep into JWT with this. So after seeing the diagram now, it's very important to first go to the place where we have to uh, tap the filter. Remember that in the my explanation, I told that we should go to a security config and then tap it there. But here in this case, uh, we are doing only two things. One is that we are authorizing requests. We are doing a permit all to everything. And then we are doing a CSRF disable. But something important other than that is the token validation as soon as we receive the token. So how do you tap that? So the way to tap that is that you're going to have a Zool filter, because we are inside Zool, we can reach the Zool filter, and that is what we are doing here. We are going to tap the Zool filter by doing extend Zool filter. So if you see my imports, you can see inside this, you will have a Zool filter. So after extending the Zool filter, the next important thing is that we are not going to touch the pre-filter or post filters, right? We are going to touch the method. We are going to override the method run. We're going to define our own things here. So first we get a current context through which we will get the client ID header and client secret header. Why are we doing this? Because we need to have something to verify when we get the JWT, so what is that something? So in the access token, we'll have the access token which will put to bearer. We have to put that inside the header for, tokens, access token. And then what we are going to do is that we are also going to, you know, uh, when we get the access tokens, we are also going to extract something. What is that we are going to extract, and why should we extract that? So inside the header, inside the tokens, we'll have something known as yes ID. So what is this yes ID? Sorry, you'll have something like KID, not yes ID. So you're receiving the token here. Key ID, the key ID. The key ID is extracted from the token using JWT decode. So there are algorithms to encode and decode using cryptography. You have to pay attention now that cryptography is something which cannot be broken by ordinary computers, but it can be broken by quantum computers. That's the strength of quantum. Why and how we'll not talk in this video, but we have to remember that uh, since quantum computers are also coming and they break the cryptography, we'll have to eventually replace the cryptographic libraries inside our security OAuth2 token and all when quantum computers are launched. but that's not the scope of this video. We'll talk that in some other video. But quickly, just to summarize what we did here is we are getting access tokens from the authorization servers. We are decoding using the JW decoder to get the key ID. And then we are going to fetch the public key, because I showed you that the authorization server is exposing the JWKS endpoint. And then this is the most important part. We are going to do a signature verification. So we are using RSA 256. And then what we are going to do is that using the GWT verifier, we're going to point to localhost 80801 issuer, and then we are going to verify the token. If the token is having the key ID, what we are expecting. So this is the algorithm, right? Get public key from GWKS. We are passing the key ID. So this public key, what it does is that it simply, takes the details, what I'm showing here in this browser. This is the endpoint, right? Which has been exposed. So it's going to search for the key ID inside this, because we exposed this port. And if the key ID is there, then it says it's matching. The key contains the key ID. If it is not there, then it says public key not found for this key ID. So during that time, the validation fails. So this is the main important point of validating token here when you get access tokens. And to summarize, what is this program doing, right? So when a request comes in, this program looks for two pieces of information requested are client ID and client secret. And then what it does is if the client credentials are present, this will send it to an authorization server to get the access token. So this token is like a temporary pass that proves the client is allowed to access the application. Now there is another important thing, token validation. That means you're going to decode the token to find a unique identifier key ID, fetching a public key from authorization server using the key identifier. And then after you fetch the public key, you're going to verify the token signature to ensure it is not expired. Then what it does is it removes the client ID and client secrets. And then, it puts those tokens, and, it allows, when the signature is verified, it allows the application access to the resource server. So just to summarize what we did on the client credentials is that we send the client credentials in a header, and then we get an access token, and we check if the key identifier which is given to us, it is that key identifier present. And then we take that key and then we do a signature verification. And if it is verified, then we take the bearer tokens, put that in the header. Sorry, you take the tokens which are issued to us. Put bearer slash tokens as shown in this program. We are putting those tokens here. Authorization basic plus we put this auth string. Then we replace that client ID and client secret with the tokens, and then the the token server is verifying those. Then it allows us to access the resource server. So in our case, the resource server is nothing but the application bureau, which is here. The application we wrote is here. This is the application server, which is having 2 points. If you see the REST template config service, it has echo student, and if I give name, it's going to respond hello with. If I give student details, it's going to respond with this response. I have purposely kept the details of resource very simple, not to go in very complexity, just to keep under clarity and understanding. Now, after doing this, I started my resource server here, which is nothing but my application. Then I have also started the Zool server, you know, and then also I have started the Spring Authorization server. So Spring Authorization server is running on 8.0.8.1. I'm not going to go into much details of the authorization server, but we just have to know that, that authorization server is capable of supplying a private key and is able to host public key on a URL. And it is able to, give the access tokens when we are asking for that. It's a simple program. We'll not go deep into this because I want to limit the scope of understanding here only to client credentials, not more than that. Uh, so let's go back to our Postman now. In the Postman, I'm doing a get call. So there is no browser intervention here. You remember this. Right? So in the get call, you don't need a body. So body should be empty. But if your authorization using OAuth2 and authorization data is in request headers, and then we have this headers where your client ID and client secret. And then for client credential based configuration to get tokens, we'll have the prefix as bearer. Then we'll have grant type as client credentials. You can give a token name, it's optional. Then you have to point to your token URL. Then you have to give a client ID and client secret, and scope I'm just saying is a read scope. Client authentication I am giving as this. Send as basic auth header. So when you say get new access token, it's going to provide you a token here. And then you do a use token and then you hit send. So now after you hit send, it is replied you with a response. So I had used eco student. You can also, let's try to duplicate this and try another call also here. So here I'm going to try get student details. Yeah, get student details. Where is the student details? You may be wondering. So this student details was here. Get student details. So let's hit that. Before that, let's go to authorization. Let's say this is what 2.0, and then all the details are same. Then I'm going to get a new access token and then proceed and say use token and then hit this. Then it says missing client or secret header. Let's go here and then put the client ID and client secret. So client ID and client secret. So client ID and client secret, what are they? It's there here. And underscore Soul Gateway client, your client underscore ID. Then this is client underscore secret. You will again copy from here. Which will go here as client secret. Let's try to hit this now. Okay, now you got a response. So this is all about the, when you have your authorization as client credentials. And you have to remember one thing is that the grant type client credentials is mostly used in the backend services. That means I build my backend service. And if I need to validate using OAuth2, then you would prefer client credentials. And then you can give a request and see whether you get a response or not to test with your postman. Hope this video was detailed enough to make you understand what sequence happens when you have client credentials and how you can use the JKWS for verification. It's not for authentication. Remember that. It is only for verification. Authentication is still OAuth2 tokens. That's it. If you like the video, please hit like button and hit on the subscribe button. Thank you.